So I think we have Heather absent this evening. Do we know about anyone else?
That's the only one I'm aware of, Marty, is Heather.
Okay, great. Thank you.
John mentioned to me that he has a conflict at 7 and might have to leave early if the meeting goes on long.
Thank you very much, Sandy.
He made me aware as well, and I will announce that in case that he does have to leave.
You guys are on it. Thank you.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is the 21st of June, and I will call this meeting of the Missoula City Council to order. This meeting is happening via Zoom webinar, and you've seen instructions both on our agenda and on the screen previous with regard to how to participate in this meeting. If you are an attendee viewing via Zoom, you can raise your hand at the appropriate times. If you're on the phone, I will recognize you by the last four numbers of your phone number, and you can mute and unmute using *6 and raise your hand by raising *9. With that, I will note for the record that all council members except for Ms. West and Ms. Anderson and Ms. Harp are in attendance this evening. We have minutes of the meeting of June 14th. See, unless there are any corrections, they'll be approved. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our schedule of committee meetings. And I will note that Ms. Anderson is here for the record. Ms. Rabine, did you hear me call for committee schedule? You did. You may be muted, however.
Apparently you can't start sharing and then figure out how to unmute very quickly. So I was noting the presence of Ms. Anderson. So I'm going to update the roll before we got to a vote. Otherwise, I can't mark her vote. So let's talk about the committee schedule for June 23rd. Have a full day of meetings. We're starting off the day with the Committee of the Whole at 8:10 in the morning. That meeting will go till 8:30. Administration and Finance Committee will meet from 8:45 in the morning to 10:45. The Land Use and Planning Committee will meet from 11 a.m. to 11:45. Budget Committee of the Whole meets from 1:45 to 2:45. Public Works Committee will meet from 3 to 3:20 in the afternoon, and Public Safety and Health Committee will meet from 3:35 to 4:45. All these meetings are being held via Zoom webinar, just like the one that you're watching right now. And to access our meetings, just go to the city's main webpage. You can type City of Missoula in your browser, and we'll probably be right there at the top of your search results. And click that meetings button that's right under the big photo in the center of the page. And that'll bring you to all of the meetings that I mentioned, as well as all of our boards and commissions in this meeting, City Council. The instructions for joining each of our webinars are on the top of the respective meetings agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Any changes to that committee schedule this evening? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the public comment portion of our agenda. This is your opportunity to comment on items not elsewhere on the agenda this evening. Any general public comment from attendees this evening? Seeing no hands raised there, we will move on to our consent agenda. Items here were approved unanimously in City Council standing committees, and we save a little time on Monday evenings by considering these items all at once. Ms. Rabine will read the list of consent agenda items aloud, so those watching the meeting and council members will know what we're talking about, and we'll invite comment on these items before we vote. Ms. Rabine.
Thanks, Mary. Again, tonight's consent agenda has 8 items. And the first item is to approve accounts payable for the city. We're paying the bills here, and this week they're in the amount of $2,565,943.59 for checks that are dated tomorrow, June 22nd, 2021. Number 2 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a construction services agreement with Zootown Investments, LLC, for the Remington Flats Phase 1 water main and sewer main upsize project for a cost not to exceed $238,008. Number 3, although a quorum isn't present, the committee recommends City Council approve and authorize the mayor to sign a professional services agreement amendment number 1 with Nelson Nygaard Consulting Associates Incorporated for the 2021 Long Range Transportation Plan at a cost not to exceed $150,000. Hang on, the next one's long, so I'm going to open it up here so I can get all the text for the motion. Although quorum wasn't present, Public Works Committee recommends that the City Council adopt the following 3 motions. The first is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign an agreement for the distribution of metropolitan planning funds with the State of Montana Department of Transportation for the Missoula Metropolitan Transportation Planning Process. Motion number 2 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a memorandum of agreement for cooperative performance-based planning measures and targets with Montana Department of Transportation. And a third part of this is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign the memorandum of agreement with the State of Montana Department of Transportation for the Missoula Metropolitan Transportation Planning Process. Number 4, or nope, that was number 4. Number 5 is, although a quorum wasn't present, the Parks and Conservation Committee recommends that City Council approve and authorize the mayor to sign an agreement with Watershed Consulting LLC for the amount of $45,500 for forest thinning on Mount Jumbo and in Marshall Canyon. Number 6, although a quorum wasn't present, Public Parks and Conservation Committee recommends that City Council confirm the mayor's appointment of Ashley Hunter to the Cemetery Board of Trustees for a term that begins immediately and expires on April 30th of 2024. Number 7, although a quorum wasn't present, Parks and Conservation Committee recommends that City Council appoint Aviv, I think it's Guccio, Virgil Jones, and Ellis Walker Kelleher to serve as youth team members on the Energy and Climate team for terms that begin immediately and end on May 31st of 2022. And finally, number 8 is to approve and authorize the mayor to execute the Trinity Master Lease Agreement.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Any questions or comments from council members this evening? Seeing, Mr. Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you please divide the questions so we can vote on 5.1 separately because of some legals to Boone Carlberg?
I'm sorry, separate item number 1, Councilman.
Yeah, if you can do that, just because of the water bills,
Okay,
legal fees.
we can certainly do that. Yes, sir. And anyone in the audience care to comment? Seeing no hands there, we'll have a roll call vote on item number 1.
Okay, and for the record, I think Ms. West has joined the meeting.
She is indeed.
So I've added her to the roll call. So on item number 1, the accounts payable claims. Hang on just a moment. Anderson,
Yes.
Becerra,
Yes.
Contos,
No.
Hess,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Merritt,
Yes.
Ramos,
No.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Vasika,
No.
Von Lossberg,
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Would any of you like to change your vote? That is 8 ayes and 3 nays.
And on the remainder, please. And 1 absent.
Okay, on the balance of the consent agenda, Becerra,
Yes.
Contos,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Merritt,
Yes.
Ramos,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Vasika,
Yes.
Von Lossberg,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
and Anderson.
Yes.
And would any of you like to change your vote? It's 11 ayes and 1 absent.
And the consent agenda is approved. We have no comments from city staff, agencies, boards, commissions, authorities, or the community forum this evening, nor do we have any special presentations. We do have 2 public hearings tonight. State law and our own council rules set guidelines for inviting community comment in a formal way on a variety of issues, and following a staff report on each, council and I will invite comment. Our process these days is to hold the public hearing open for a week or until council takes the item up for final consideration, typically the following week. So there will be no final action this evening, though we will take comment until that final action is taken. Our first public hearing this evening is on the Development Review Capacity Plan and Fee Schedule Amendment, and presenting is Aaron Pahan.
Good evening, Erin Pahan with Community Planning Development and Innovation. I'm grateful to be here tonight, as the mayor mentioned, to present a development review capacity plan and an amended fee schedule for your consideration. All the documents that I'll reference in the presentation tonight include, including the detailed fee schedule, can be found linked to the agenda on the city's website. So I've been at CPDI a little over 6 months now, and one of the first things I was charged with, both by city leadership and by the development community, was to address our ability to respond to development review in a timely manner. Tonight, I'll be presenting a 3-part plan on behalf of Community Planning, Development and Innovation, Public Works and Mobility, and Parks and Rec, that is aimed at addressing timely review and more, putting us on the right path to promoting equitable growth in a resilient and a sustainable community. A quick note on how this plan came to be. In February, we began meeting with stakeholder groups that consisted of contractors, developers, architects, and engineers, all of whom are facing frustrations with the current system. Over the course of 3 months, we worked with these stakeholders to better understand their frustrations and to develop clear actions that would provide tangible results. The resulting plan was unanimously supported by these stakeholders, all of whom agreed that a reasonable increase in fees on the front end that reduced timely delays on the back end would save them money that would be passed on to renters and homeowners, positively impacting the housing market as a whole. So with that, let's jump in. As all of you know, in the last several years, the city of Missoula has experienced a surge in development review activities that have really prevented us from providing the level of responsive service the community has come to expect. These delays are working against the goals that are outlined in our adopted housing policy. This proposal outlines the short and medium-term steps that we propose to address this issue. These steps will occur in 3 distinct areas: staffing, ensuring we have enough skilled professionals to do the work; process, assessing the review process to identify improvements and to eliminate unnecessary regulation or barriers; and lastly, code reform, working to streamline and modernize our code, creating better alignment with our goals and our values as a city. In the area of staffing, our short-term goal is to amend the land use and engineering fee schedules to support additional staff for development review, which you'll hear more about tonight. Our medium-term goal is to better understand our staffing needs and adequately plan for them in the future. So we're adding the number of skilled professionals we need on an annual basis to protect ourselves from getting in this situation in the future. In the area of process, our short-term goals center around the building permit process. We've recently applied a priority in building permit review for residential permits, ensuring residential projects don't get stuck in the queue behind large commercial projects. We're also in the process of updating checklists and process flowcharts, providing for more clarity and predictability. In the medium term, we'll work to take this process assessment and improvement to all areas of development review. And lastly, in the area of code reform, our short-term goal will be to create a scope of work for comprehensive code reform. The city of Missoula adopted a bold and comprehensive planning document in our Missoula, our growth policy, in 2015. However, the most recent version of our regulatory code was established over a decade ago and does not provide us the tools that we need to actualize the goals found in the growth policy. So after years of providing Band-Aid fixes, it's time for comprehensive reform, and we'll be excited to share the details about that and make a proposal to council as part of this year's budget process. In the medium term, our goal will be to launch that work. So to ensure we meet the mark and that these strategies do lead to reduced development review timelines, increased consistency, and increased clarity, therefore reducing the overall cost of development, we set very clear outcomes that we can measure our success by. You'll see we have these listed in short-term outcomes within 6 months, and these include things like reducing the permit review times for single-family homes and duplexes from 10 to 12 weeks to 2 to 4 weeks. So you'll see we've set really audacious yet achievable goals. Our medium-term outcomes, which we propose to achieve in the next 12 months, include broader programmatic and code reform issues, along with department-wide process improvements that we know will be necessary to not just deal with the development surge in front of us, but make sure that we are functioning on a really high, sophisticated level to be able to apply new processes, new code, as we continue to see development and growth in Missoula. So more broadly put, the increased capacity from the proposed development review fee amendments will lead to increased capacity in skilled and trained staff members who will support process improvements and start to lead the way or provide that path on code reform. These activities will lead to decreased review times, more responsive service, more clarity and predictability in both our process and in our code, and better alignment between our code and our goals. So the first step is ensuring we have the capacity of skilled professionals to meet the specific outcomes and broad goals that we just reviewed. We're proposing building our development review team by bringing on 5 additional development review professionals. These are the individuals that are charged with reviewing the over 7,000 land use applications and building permits that cross our doorstep every year. Additionally, our Deputy Director of Development Services, Walter Banziger, who is new to our department, is charged with identifying process improvements throughout the system to ensure we're not just relying on staff alone to solve our capacity issues, but that we're working smarter as well. So we're proposing to fund this capacity plan through a reasonable increase to the development review schedule. Today, the general fund or tax revenue subsidizes the cost of development review on average by 50%. This proposal builds capacity without relying on everyday Missoulians to fund it by assessing a reasonable cost increase to the development review activity under review. If done right and we meet the outcomes proposed, it will decrease, not increase, the overall cost of development through the savings of time. A few things I want to note about the proposed amended fee schedule. In 2010, the City of Missoula completed a cost of service or user fee study. This study looked at what the true cost of service was for various activities across the city, including development review, and recommended appropriate fees to assess in each area. There's a column on the proposed fee amendment that is attached to the referral that is titled 2010 User Fee Study. This column outlines the difference between what the proposed fee is in the amended study and what the cost of service study essentially said would be a fair assessment at the completion of that over a decade ago. You'll note that most of the columns are in red, which indicates that the proposed fee amendments before you tonight are still generally below those recommended fees of a decade ago. So the city proposes increasing that revenue by 2 specific efforts. One of those is adding development review fees that do not currently exist on our fee schedule. Things like our newly adopted annexation plan and the Sutepke master plan review or form-based code area. In addition, it generally applies 15% of increases to development review, the remaining development review on that schedule, as well as on the engineering schedule as it applies to land use. We also are proposing resubmittal fees. So the city currently reviews some applications that come in substantially incomplete or deficient in many areas. We're not talking about applications where we have 2 or 3 things or even a half dozen things that are not quite complete, but again, substantially incomplete applications. This takes excessive staff time and review and really clogs up the entire queue, preventing us from moving on to projects whose applications are more complete. So we are proposing the initiation of a resubmittal fee for those projects that we deem substantially incomplete. We know that there is a lot of concern from the development community regarding resubmittal fees because there isn't a clear definition of what substantially incomplete is, and we still have some work to do on our process. So to assess this fee fairly, we would need to ensure that our process is clear, consistent, and easily followed by anyone in the development community. So while we're proposing this fee as part of the new amended fee schedule, we plan on working closely with the development community to both define substantially incomplete and to ensure that there's clarity around our process through the use of checklists and process improvements before we would initiate any type of a fee. So we are asking City Council at the conclusion of this public hearing next week to adopt a resolution that generally increases fees by 15% to more closely align with the fee schedule in the 2010 user fee analysis. That will support our efforts to promote equitable development in a resilient and sustainable community in Missoula. And with that, I am happy to take any questions from council. I know we also have a few of our stakeholders who helped in the creation of this plan as guests at the meeting tonight, and they may want to speak on behalf of this as well.
And thank you very much, Ms. Pahan. And with that, I will open the public hearing and invite anyone who would care to comment at this point to raise a hand and let me know. And at the moment, I do not see any hands raised among audience members. Oh, now I see some. Ryan Frey. And you are unmuted, sir.
All right, am I there?
You are.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to thank Aaron for reaching out to us and involving us in this process. And I just want to say that, you know, generally it's like pulling teeth for us developers to add a new fee to what we do. But in this case, I personally have high hopes for this process because the fees are coupled with process improvements that has specific targets to decrease review time, which we're pretty excited about because I think it's gotten to the point where there isn't any predictability, and this brings some predictability back to the process. And generally, I personally support it.
Thank you, sir. And Gene Mostad. It looks
Can you
like
hear me?
now we can, Gene. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a pleasure working with Aaron or having someone downtown that's actually working on a process to I guess align and just have someone work on this thing, because for the last few years it just feels like it's been out there in limbo, and things just continue to get worse and worse. And with the new computer system for building permits and stuff, and implementing that, and not having enough staff has really put a crunch on us being able to get building permits and go through subdivision and all that stuff. So Aaron has been very professional, very helpful, and I thank the city for at least hiring someone that we can talk with and be heard, because that's always been a problem in the past. Is I think the development building community just hasn't felt that they have been heard or saw any action to our requests. So I've stayed involved with Aaron through most of the process. And like she says in her thing, we still got a long ways to go, but at least we're headed in the right direction. So I appreciate that. We're still having some pretty good hiccups in the building permit process on how things are getting reviewed and kicked out. And so I'm hoping in the next 6 months that we can start seeing more successes. And I'm sure Aaron is too. So, but yes, I totally support what she has proposed and look forward to some gains. This cost a lot of our clients a lot of money in the last year, having this process take a lot longer. It isn't necessarily the city's fault that we have this COVID thing and shortages and cost increases, but it sure brought and highlighted what the time delays can do in a unprecedented fashion. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mostad. Seeing no additional hands up among attendees, are there questions or comments from council members? Right. Seeing none, this public hearing will remain open. I want to let you all know how much I appreciate the work that Ms. Pahan and her team have done working with the folks who build homes in our community to try to solve for the challenges that in some cases are all about us and in some cases not completely about us. But this is a thoughtful, meaningful step in the right direction, and the fact that we have members of our community who are in the home building business tell us that that they are on board with this plan and process is gratifying, and I hope that you all will support it when it's before you for final consideration next week. Mr. Hess.
Thanks, Mayor. I apologize. I was fumbling to find the raise hand feature. You'd think I'd have that figured out by now. I was wondering, maybe Aaron, if you had any sense of if you have any way to quantify what this time savings might translate into as far as potential savings or potential reduction in housing costs.
That's a wonderful question, and it's extreme in all instances, but it can be incredibly extreme. We have spoken with developers where 6 to 8 weeks could result in savings simply from carrying costs alone of $10,000 to $20,000. And again, those savings directly get either passed on to or costs get assessed to the eventual homeowner when we're talking about home ownership opportunities. We've had a few instances of individuals who have had to refinance their entire project over a 6 to 12 week delay. There are things like security agreements that have timeframes to them, and when those expire, developers have to renew those. And so in some instances where an entire refinancing is required or new security agreements have to be renewed because of delays, that could cost projects upward of $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. And that, I would say, is for a relatively moderate sized project like a 6 to 10 unit TED. So when we're talking about very large subdivisions or very large multifamily development, you only multiply those. And so I do think what we're hearing across the board, and I think what you're seeing from the development community and their embracing of a reasonable fee increase, is that the cost of time is disproportionately negatively impacting these projects, as opposed to a necessary fee to build the capacity and eliminate that time delay.
Thanks, Jen. That's helpful.
Okay. Any further discussion from council members? All right. Well, thank you very much. This item will remain, the public hearing will remain open on this item for the following week. And we'll move on to our second public hearing of this evening, which is a subdivision exemption for family transfer. And this is at the corner of Polk and Poplar Streets in the Rattlesnake Valley. And Ms. Lucken has our staff report this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Let's make this full screen. All right. Good evening. My name is Emily Gluckin, and I am an associate planner in the Development Services Division of CPDI. Tonight, I will be presenting a subdivision exemption request for a family transfer of Tract 1 of Certificate of Survey 6397. This request was submitted by Steve Inabnit, who is both the property owner and applicant. This subdivision request includes the transfer of 2 tracts of the applicant's land to his son and daughter, respectively. Montana state law authorizes the division of land for the purpose of a single gift of sale to each member of the landowner's immediate family. The city subdivision regulations require the review and hearing before city council if the requested family transfer is for a use different from the land use designation provided in the city growth policy, but is one that complies with the goals, objectives, or policies of the growth policy. I will go into more detail about this in a few slides, but first I'd like to provide some context. The property is located at the corner of Polk and Poplar Streets. This is in the lower Rattlesnake neighborhood and City Council Ward 1. The property borders Mount Jumbo, and it is adjacent to a neighborhood access trailhead to access Mount Jumbo. The applicable regional plan is the Missoula 2035 growth policy, and this designates the property as parks and open lands. To the west and to the north, surrounding properties are designated as residential medium. Areas with the parks and open lands designation are generally open in nature and are intended for use as a public park, a common area for a group of residents, or for conservation purposes. And the relatable Title 20 zoning district is OP1, open space. Following this family transfer, the applicant proposes to use the tracts for residential purposes, which conflicts with this land use designation. However, the proposal for residential uses does comply with the housing goals of the growth policy, which includes providing for diverse housing needs through compatible residential development. And the proposal also supports the growth policy's recommendation for clustering development that is located on resource land or on natural hazards, which in this case includes steep hillsides on the property to minimize impacts to sensitive areas. The property has a base zoning of R5.4 residential, and it is within the Woody Planned Unit Development, or PUD. And it is adjacent to open space districts and some unzoned land. The R5.4 zone allows single detached homes or lot line houses. The minimum parcel area required is 5,400 square feet, and the minimum parcel area per dwelling unit required is also 5,400 square feet in this district. The minimum required setbacks include a 20-foot front setback, a 20-foot rear setback, a 10-foot street side setback, and an interior side setback of 7.5 feet, or 1/3 of the building height, whichever is larger. And the maximum height allowed in the R5.4 zone is 30 feet or 35 feet if there is a roof pitch of 8 and 12 or greater. And finally, the Woody PUD has a stipulation that no building footprint for a primary or accessory structure can be built above the 3,260 foot ground elevation line. So that's specific to that PUD only. Currently, tract 1 is just under an acre at 40,652 square feet. It is currently vacant land with a steep slope on the eastern portion of the property. And the property has frontage on Polk Street and the Poplar Street right-of-way. And it also abuts a 16-foot wide alley off of Polk Street. Following the family transfer, tract 1 will be split into 3 tracts, and 2 of these will be gifted to the applicant's son and daughter, which are tract 1 and 2. So both proposed tract 1 and 2 will be 5,857 square feet. Tract 1 will have frontage on Polk Street and the Poplar Street right-of-way, and tract 2 will have frontage on Polk Street and will abut the alley. Track 3 will be 28,939 square feet and will abut the Poplar Street right of way, and will be accessed via the alley. And this tract contains the steep hillsides over the 1,260 mark. Each tract is proposed for residential development, and new development on each tract will be required to meet all applicable municipal regulations at the time of building permit review. Staff received written agency comment from City Fire and City Parks and Recreation. City Fire commented that while the site plan complies with the fire apparatus access requirements of International Fire Code, the proximity to and the volume of the proposed fire hydrant is not sufficient. Therefore, residential fire sprinklers will be required in each building. And City Parks provided a comment that any future improvements to the street or the parcel must consider the adjacent trailhead. That access is Mount Jumbo. And in addition to these written comments received, staff also communicated with city engineering regarding this request to determine appropriate conditions of approval. So staff recommends 7 conditions of approval on this subdivision exemption request. The first is in relation to the requirement of the Woody PUD that no building may be built above that 3,260 foot elevation mark. So staff recommends a condition of approval requiring that the no build zone area be shown on the amended certificate of survey as shown on this map in blue. The second condition recommended requires the installation of right-of-way improvements on Polk Street. This includes asphalt road surface, curb and gutter, curbside sidewalk, a landscape boulevard, and a 5-foot curb laydown at the adjacent trailhead. And this can either be prior to filing the amended certificate of survey or secured through an improvements agreement. Both conditions number 3 and 4 relate to the filing of 2 easements and showing them on the amended certificate of survey when that gets filed. The first is a utility easement for the water service line between tract 1 and tract 2. And the other is a private access and utility easement at the northwest side of the proposed sewer service for the use and benefit of tract 3 for both utility and physical access to the tract. The final 3 conditions relate to the comments received from City Fire, requiring the installation of the proposed fire hydrant, the provision of a note on the amended certificate of survey, demonstrating the requirement to install residential fire sprinklers. And the third is the requirement that the applicant install residential fire sprinklers prior to the certificate of occupancy for each building. To conclude, staff recommends the approval of this subdivision exemption request for family transfer as presented and subject to the 7 conditions of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Glucker. I will open the public hearing. And I see a hand up. Meredith Prince.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
This is actually Meredith's husband, Doug. I live right across the street at 715 Polk Street. The area there is a popular trailhead, and that spot that the 2 homes will be built on, I'm assuming will have driveways in front. That spot literally is the parking for the trailhead. And so my question is, where is that parking going to go? It's going to be pushed out onto the residences around the trailhead, which are already pretty heavily taxed at certain times of the year, more and more every year. So that is a big question, is what is going to happen with the parking for the trailhead? Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no additional hands up, this public hearing will remain open. Questions from council members. And I actually have a question myself, Ms. Gluckin. One is, assuming that council approves the exemption, we'll be seeing an application for rezoning as well?
No, it's just the family transfer.
So within and I'm sorry, I thought that I saw that the zoning designation here was public land, yes?
That is the land use designation.
Sorry, it's not the zoning designation. Thank you.
No, the
Yes.
zoning is the R 5.4 Woody PUD.
Thank you. My other question is with regard to the belt and suspenders. We install a new fire hydrant immediately in front of the properties. I'm assuming that fire hydrant would have sufficient flow. Otherwise, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us to install it. Why, therefore, would we require residential sprinklers? And that's a question for fire that you could convey for benefit of council, I think, moving forward. Great, thank you. Other questions? Mr. Hess.
Thanks, Mayor. Emily, I wonder if you could address Mr. Prince's question about parking, trailhead parking. And I guess specifically, it seems like the trailhead parking is an informal established use that's on this private lot. And I wonder if staff have any comments on the parking question and how that might get sorted out.
Sure, I think I'd like to follow up with Parks and Rec too, and I can bring that to LUP. But my understanding from having conversations with Neil from Parks is that the trailhead on Polk and Poplar is what they refer to as a neighborhood access, so a more kind of a smaller scale one. And the trailhead that I guess they'd like to push people more towards, or that is intended to serve more people, is, I believe it's on Cherry Street. It's a few streets down. And that's kind of where improvements and investment would go from Parks versus this kind of smaller scale one. But I'll ask Parks if he has any ideas about the parking. I think I would assume that more parking would be desired on the bigger trailhead down the street or down the block.
Thanks, I appreciate it. It would be helpful if Parks would be able to be present on Wednesday to address any specifics on that.
Definitely.
And Ms. McCray, did you have something to clarify? You're muted.
I needed to unmute. Yes, I believe when they complete that road section, instead of kind of parking on the dirt there should be parking adjacent to the curbside. So there actually will be, although there will be 2 driveway curb cuts, there'll likely still be some parking along the street there.
Thank you, Ms. McCray. Ms. Becerra.
Thank you. Emily, if this were to go through a subdivision review process, it would be a minor subdivision, correct? And could you tell me what the fee for that is versus the fee for a family transfer?
Mary might know the fee for a minor subdivision off the top of her head. For a family transfer, it's $200. I believe it's just kind of filed under the subdivision exemption, which is a $200 fee mandated by state law.
Okay.
Mary, do you know what the minor subdivision cost would be?
And Mary, you're muted again.
You would think I would know how to unmute after all this time.
I don't, and it's been a while.
It is around $5,000 for a minor subdivision. And the $200 fee is mandated in state law. We can't increase that. Thank you.
And Mr. Von Lossberg.
Thanks. It's my question, Emily, is along the same lines of what the mayor brought up. I had noted that fire had commented that they would still be short of the volume requirements even with the fire hydrant, and that was the reason for the sprinkler requirement as well. But I'm wondering if we could maybe get comment from the water utility in addition to fire. It just wasn't clear to me from that explanation why we have a volume issue with the installation of a fire hydrant.
I can follow up with fire.
All right, seeing no further questions, again, the public hearing will remain open for a week. We have no additional public hearings this evening, nor do we have any items for final consideration. I'll pass on communications from the mayor and begin council comments with Mr. Von Lossberg.
Thank you.
Did you pass, Brian? I'm sorry, we had a little hiccup.
Sorry. Yes, I did. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Becerra.
I'll pass, thank you.
Ms. Vasika.
Thanks. I'll be quick. A couple of weeks ago, I mentioned that summer's coming and to not leave your child or your pets in your car. And I figured that bringing some numbers would make it more real for people. When it's 80 degrees outside, within 10 minutes, it can be 100 degrees inside your vehicle if all the windows are up and all the doors are closed. After 30 minutes, it can get up to 115 degrees inside your car. If it's 90 degrees outside, after 10 minutes, it can be 110 degrees inside your car. And after 30 minutes, it can be up to 125 degrees inside your car. So please just be aware, it gets super hot inside your vehicle if all the windows are up and all the doors are closed. So just be very aware of that. And please don't do that to your kiddos or to your pets. Thank you.
Ms. Merritt.
I pass.
Ms. Jones.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Mr. Ramos.
I will pass. Thank you.
Ms. West.
Pass.
Ms. Cheryl.
Pass. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just really quick, it's that time of year for celebrating the 4th of July, and fireworks are illegal in the city limits. So please be kind to your neighbors. You don't know what the circumstances they may be, if they're a veteran or just have a hard time with those loud noises, and also the neighborhood pets. This is the time of year where we have the largest amount of pets who run away because of the noise. And so just first, follow the law, and second, just be a kind, courteous neighbor. There's plenty of places where you can go outside the city limits to partake if that is your fancy. But remember, fireworks are against the law and the city limits. Thank you.
And Mr. Hess.
I'll pass. Thanks, Mayor.
We have no committee reports this evening. We don't have any new business. Are there any additional items to be referred? Seeing none of those, are there any miscellaneous communications, petitions, reports, or announcements? And seeing none of those, as always, I thank you for your service, and we will be adjourned.